is an so it's a 25% component of your exam, and what we want to be able to do essentially is understand how do we go about doing this particular test. Now, to begin with, what we are looking at is going into the details. But to begin with, what I would want to do is basically take you through the steps of actually seeing how an exam happens or what it comes in the exam. So we'll visually look at it because it will help us understand very quickly in terms of what we want to then get to. So if I look at the practice test link, this is something that I will share with you guys on the chat, obviously, so that you are able to have this link with you. And at some stage, this is something that you would be looking at going through at your end as well. Now, when we are on this particular page, which is the NCFE page, feel free to ask me questions when you have to, not a problem at all, so that I'm able to address some of your queries. Now, when you are looking at this particular page on NCFE's website, we scroll down and we scroll down to going to the on-screen English guidance. And then so sorry, not on this types of practice assessments, and there are different types of papers which are available. So you have practice test papers, you if you want to do it on a paper basis, or essentially I would say you need to do the test which is primarily on the exam taken on the PC, because we don't offer any paper-based exams. So when you click on this particular bar, it opens up a couple of tests. So there is one reading, one writing, and one maths test. So because we're focusing on writing today, what we're going to do is click on this particular link, and this link would launch the test as it would happen in the center. So you'd be allocated a PC. On the PC, this is an environment which is running, and there'll be a test code which will be there. When we click, the invigilator will come in and obviously put the test code in. You'd be asked to check your name, date of birth, and obviously this is a test that you're doing. You click less, and then there is a terms and condition which comes up, which says that so there is a terms and condition which will come up, and it will say that okay, this is the test that you are looking at doing, and when it comes up to this particular test, you read these terms and conditions. It's a time test for 70 minutes or 1 hour 10 minutes. We won't be able to change the time once the test starts. You are not allowed to take any breaks or refer to any notes or anything that you've got. You'd be just sitting on the PC. You'll have a rough paper and a pen given to you. Should you need to write anything or have anything that you want to write, that would be something that would be used. But apart from that, pretty much nothing else would be available. And then when you click continue, it'll give you the instructions for the test. The test hasn't started yet. So the test would start when we go to the section and it comes up and serves the paper. So it'll tell you the instructions here that this is the rest written writing test part that you're doing. The test is about 1 hour 10 minutes. Read the questions, some instructions. The test is 44 marks. And obviously the use of dictionary is not permitted. So when you click on this button, start the test, that is when it will actually come up with the timer. And as you see on the top, the 1 hour 10 minutes straight away, the clock started. And this is where it will give you an overview of what you're expected to do in the test. So this is an assessment about driving age and workplace contacts. Read the information provided and complete the two writing activities. The first activity is write an article. So in this test, the person who's taking it has got an article to write, and the second one, it is saying write an email. So both the activities have to be completed, and there are going to be certain amount of word limits that you would need to be completing, so that it is it is ample words that you've written for the examiner to mark your English language proficiency in terms of writing. Now when I click next, it'll start with the first activity. The navigation is on the left. So if I want to start with the email first, I can go because that's a simpler activity. I can click on the second one and come back to the first one and back again. But this is how the editor will look like on your screen. Typical editor wherein you use a Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, whatever you're using as a personal email address. You normally see there are bits and pieces available for formatting. There's a two column, there's a subject column, and this space where you would write would automatically keep expanding because when you start typing in, this is like a dynamic text box which will expand. Now, One of the things that you will need to note when you do a writing test is that there's a minimum word count given. So your article will need to be 250 to 350 words. That means you have to write at least 250, and it can go up to 350. If you want to write more, that's fine, but I would suggest writing between the word limit, is because you don't want unnecessary errors, mistakes, punctuation, and grammar to be checked. You would want to write which is something related to what has been given as guidance, and that would be good enough for us to check, or when I say us, I mean NCFE's examiners, to check whether the person has the level 2 required level of English or not. Now, we would do this particular exercise and do it to understand how do we go about doing this and how do we prepare. So one of the things that I would recommend and suggest is that take 5 minutes to read what is being asked for, and read it properly and read it well, because what you need to do is, after reading it, you need to actually concise your thoughts in terms of how you're going to write about it. Now, couple of things that I know when you write an article, as I've shared with you in the last session, is that article will always have a heading, and it'll always say article written by, because we need to be looking at understanding where do you read articles. When you pick up a newspaper, a magazine, or an editorial document, they would have articles wherein a journalist, a publisher, or an author would have written something about a particular topic or a discussion point, and there the person would also write their name, then that this is written by such and such journalist or such and such author. So articles would typically have headlines. You can also have a subheadline, and then sometimes you write the date and also write who has written this particular article. So it says the minimum driving age in the UK is 17 years old. Some people think that new drivers should not drive after dark. Write an article giving your views on whether the minimum driving age should be lowered. Now, one of the key things which I pick out in this particular article is that it is saying write an article giving your views. The important point, your views on whether the minimum driving age should be lowered. Now, to me, when I look at doing something, I sometimes are able to actually look at finding some parts of what I'm expected to do as clues within the instructions given. So within this part, I would be looking at, maybe shortening this big paragraph into what is called, the headline for the, I would say, article. This could be something that I could do. So what I would do is I would shorten this particular line into, say, a headline for an article. Now, this would be useful because although you can, find something relevant from the instructions given, and obviously create, use that text or that sentence to create a headline, but that could be something that I feel as a tip that I would give you, is that something which can be done. Now, if I look at this way, it says your views. One of the things that it is asking for is my views on whether. So if I delete all the clutter and say it says whether the minimum driving age should be lowered, that would be the headline, essentially for, I would say, the article. Now you could have something very different, but I'm just giving you some ideas that how you would look at picking out clues from the instructions given before you even start writing the article. Now, after that, it would say, so written by, and I would put the basic bits like written by Raman Singh. And in some cases, if you want to put the date down, you can put it down, but that might not be necessary. So I would normally put it in this format, which is what normally you would see it on articles. So lowering the minimum driving age, your views. So and I would say views, because obviously I'm going to put lots of views in it. Now, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is, before I firm up the heading or the headline for the article, I need to also know what I'm going to be covering in that article. So in the test, you're given some bullet points to say what is it that you need to write the article about. In a way, again, giving away clues to you to say these are the things that you're required to cover in the article. I don't want to write just about anything under the sun. what they are saying is let's clearly look at what is required. So in this article, it'll say you could explain what age is you think appropriate to learn to drive. Now, it will also say describe the advantages of learning to drive at a young age, and it will also give you a clue that what you need to be able to do is essentially say whether nighttime lessons, you know, should be compulsory for new drivers or people who are just achieving that driving age of 17. Now, when I look at this, I would read, and when you have a bit of a paper and pencil, paper and pen given to you at the test, sometimes I can think, in my mind, but sometimes I would need to write down what I'm actually going to write about. So there are a couple of things that I would look at before I start. So first things first, as you recall from the last session, what I said is when you write something, you're looking at breaking it down into three paragraphs or three parts. First part would be introducing what you're writing about or talking about. Second part would be the main crux of the story, which is what you're either proposing, you're either covering opinions, you're quoting statistics, or you're bringing data in, which is imaginative or fictional data or information that you're going to include to create that aura that I'm going to be talking about this particular topic. And towards the end, you would obviously end or conclude with some sort of an opinion, a decision, or a direction that this is what is possible, this is what is not possible, this is what should be done, or this is what I feel would be, something which will be workable. So here, I would start off with a bit of an introduction. Now, there are a couple of ways of looking at writing it. I don't want to make it obvious, but because I'm going to take you through in terms of understanding how to do it, I'm going to write also some of these bits like introduction. So essentially, we might not need to write it when you're doing the exam. Now, in this case, what I would do is I would need to introduce what I've understood from these few lines which have been given for me to write the article. So because the topics can be anything under the sun when you get an exam, but this is just an example. We need to be able to articulate our thoughts and our process to be able to write the article. So here I would say, in an introduction, I'm going to write it in third person because this is an article. I would try and do away with the terminology of using too much of I, you, or me. I would write it in third person. So this is one of the things which you need to look at when you're writing an article. So headlines are going to be bold, but then I make the text, unbold it. You can bold, unbold, italics from here. When you put some sort of an important information, you can highlight that in your article. And that would be bits that you would use to do the formatting. So it looks, feels, reads like an article. So whether the minimum driving age should be lowered is a debate that comes up. I'm just thinking of, how I'm going to write the article. So I'm pouring my thoughts down in terms of writing, comes up regularly. And I think it deserves a balanced answer rather than and other than an emotional one. As you can see, while typing, if I'm making any mistakes, I'm correcting it because it is a writing test. And again, what I don't want to be doing in the test is making a lot of writing mistakes or spelling mistakes because that would mean deduction of my marks. So because it says your views, this article or a topic that has been given would invite a lot of personal views. So it would be written, in the first language, personally. So in my case, I have to look at punctuation personally, comma, I do not, I won't say I don't. This would be, not appropriate. So I would use the word I do not think the driving age should be significantly, so this is my opinion because I'm giving my views, should be lowered, but I do believe there is room to improve how and when young people learn to drive. So, what I've done is I've just done a quick bit of introduction to explain that I understand what the topic is. I would be looking at giving you my views, which are both positive and negative, and I would propose why. And I'm kind of agreeing to disagreeing to say that, okay, the minimum age should not be lowered, but it should not be significantly lowered, but there is room wherein we can look at maneuverability, even if the age is kept at the age limit is kept at the limit of 17. So then I start with the main part of the article that I'm going to write. So uh, I think 17 years, 17 years is a reasonable age to start learning to drive at this stage. Now, why I do feel that it is going to be reasonable, what I need to do is justify this by writing at least one or two points that I am able to back it up with. So at this stage, most people are emotionally mature better. So you can keep typing and obviously do a bit of proofreading towards the end. But I like to do it like this because if I make any mistakes, I would probably course correct it there and then rather than coming back to it later. Better at assessing risk and more capable of handling responsibility than they would be at 15 or 16. So what I've done is I've said why 17 is reasonable, and I'm creating some discussion points or arguments which I think also would give an idea to the reader that okay, while writing this article, I'm considering that 15 or 16 could also be an age, but I am debating that I think 17 is just about right, and bringing it down, to 15 or 16 might not be a good decision. But along with that, what I'm doing is also justifying that why I feel that this age is perfect for the young people to be able to start driving. So giving a couple of points here, lowering the age to far risks putting learners behind the wheel before they are ready to make safe decisions. Now, keeping in mind again punctuation, lowering the age is too far risk, putting learners behind, my spelling, the wheel before they are ready to make safe decisions. Now, this is the first argument which I put forward saying 17 is fine because I'm framing up my thoughts and what I'm doing is also covering the words. So I have one eye on the word limit. I've already written 149. So I need to look at another 149 words maximum to be able to complete my article. Now, that said, there are clear. So what I would do in this is now I would talk about some advantages and disadvantages, why I favor 17 or lowering the age, or some of these bullet points to cover and add meat on the bones, like for example, add words and sentences and paragraphs to my article to bring it to a close. So that said, there are clear advantages to learning to drive. And as you can see, I type quite fast, but some of you might not be typing quite fast. So that is where the time comes in. So my one eye is on the clock as well, that there are two activities to complete. What I would need to do is look at about 30 minutes for one activity and then keep 5 minutes for proofreading just to make sure that, I've covered everything. And if there are any things that I need to delete or, change, I have that time to be able to do so. So the way I would plan to do the paper would be 10 minutes, 5 minutes giving a thorough read to each of the activity, 5 minutes for proofreading, and 25 minutes for writing. And that would allow you to complete the paper in a good amount of time, and you would be happy with what you've written or what you've covered in the paper. So, so just quickly looking at a couple of points which I think I've looked at. Younger learners obviously often pick up practical skills more quickly because they are quite agile, they are nimble, and obviously in some cases the mind, is more enthusiastic and motivated to, learning and they are open to instructions. So instructions So I'm just putting some points forward, which I think I would have gone through and I would have looked at learning to drive. So learning earlier can also support. Again, another point which I think is independence, because a lot of people at this age, want to look at becoming independent, and especially, I would say, especially in rural areas, or people, if you are living in smaller towns and cities, then obviously you are looking at driving, because public transport facilities might not be very well developed even in the UK, or at least they would be limited. So you have a bus service, but maybe the bus service is every 2 hours, or if you have a tram or a train service, it's only morning and evening. So some people would want to look at the option of driving. So some young people driving, so for some young people, driving makes it easier to access education, work, and even contribute to family responsibilities. So I'm making things up, which makes sense as long as you are adding it towards that it is going to make sense. That is what you could look at talking about. Should not be, should not be ignored. Now, I've given some advantages. What I would want to do is, obviously, as you can see, I've already reached to 23 words. I'm going to try and bring it now to a slow end. I can't just abruptly end this, so I need to look at one or two quick propositions that I want to write, so that I can then conclude or summarize what I've actually said in the article. So, however, earlier learning, so one or negative, I want to highlight, or a disadvantage, earlier learning should come with stronger safeguards, you know, because giving or putting young drivers behind the wheel, if they are very young, because they are quite passionate and obviously quite enthusiastic, should also come with responsibility. So I believe night, night time driving lessons should be compulsory. So I'm agreeing with some of the points which has been provided as tips, and I would like to light this particular article compulsory. And the reason why I would say this is I put down a point that many drivers um, are, or many drivers may struggle due to reduced visibility, fatigue, and in some cases, unfamiliar roads, roads or road condition. If you've not traveled that road, or if you've not gone through that road once or twice before, then during driving during night time, might be might be unsafe, and that would create a bit of nervousness in yourself when you're driving through it alone. So advantages and disadvantages. So what I want to do is give across some headings, which is just to differentiate, and that's the debate that we are looking at doing in the article. And then making night driving a required part of training would better prepare the learners for real life situations, and also reduce the risk of accidents after passing their driving test. So I have now given one big disadvantage, some disadvantages, and then what I would like to do is do a conclusion in terms of, because I'm also reaching the word limit, so I like to do, I'm not wanting to just stick at 250, not go over 350, but I'm writing my whole thought process down and making sure that I'm covering all these 3 points sufficiently. So I've touched on night driving lessons, I've touched on advantages, I've touched on what I think about the driving age. Now I need to bring this to an end. So I would say overall, so what I would do is, obviously I don't want to make this bold, but what I'll do is if I've made it bold, select overall. Now, capitalization important, overall, comma, I do not support lowering the minimum driving age, but I do support improving driver education. The focus should be on quality of training and readiness, not simply getting people on the road sooner. The driving is a serious responsibility, and the system should reflect that. Now, that helps me conclude. And I think from what I have written across these points, which I've covered, I think I've done sufficiently well to be able to pass without iota of doubt. So that is how you would normally write an article. Now, if there are bits and pieces that you want to, say, for example, do a bit of formatting on when you're doing a bit of proofreading, I would say I do not support. I could probably make this in italics because it clearly highlights what the conclusion of my views are on the article, and that would be the bits that you could do. Now, any questions on this? Okay. Now, when we go to this first activity which is there, which is write an email instead of a letter, we've got an email. So we need to know how we are writing the email. So again, here there are some instructions very clearly given, which says career loop. We have an international company that helps. So basically, first things first is make sure that you read the instructions very clearly because it is important for you to understand the instructions. The reason I say this is if you know what is being asked of you to write, then you can frame your thoughts, take a couple of minutes after reading it, and then essentially go about writing it. So here it says Career Loop. We're an international company that helps make professional contacts by sharing news and updates through an email. Let us connect you with people from your industry around the world. So it reminds me immediately of LinkedIn, which is something like what this company is offering services for. I can connect with other people for professional networking. It says write an email introducing yourself. You could in that email tell yourself or introduce yourself to the new contact, describe your workday routine, explain how international work connections could help benefit you, and you have to write the email to connect@careerloop.biz. So they have given you an email address. Whatever first thing I'll do is basically two or three things I will look at, understanding from the instructions given. First part is there is no word limit given here. But generally, when we do write emails, these emails are between 150 to 175 words. They can be shorter. You can sometimes write very short emails as well. But because you're doing an exam and it's 22 marks, what I would assume in this case would be that anything less than 150 to you know anything less than half a page would not be acceptable. You would not be graded well in terms of this activity. So it is best to keep it in mind that when you are getting an email and it does not, or a letter to write, and it does not specify a word limit, then the best thing to do is to gear yourself up to be able to write 175 words as a minimum. Now they have given you enough clues here or pointers here to be able to write that much. And obviously, there are three bullet points which we need to extrapolate, think about it, and then essentially include those points in a way which allow us to write that much in three parts in the letter, which is like a story introduction, first introducing yourself, as it's saying, then it says describe your workday routine, which is the main part, and then how this website could help you build your connections, which could benefit you for work. So first things first, I immediately it comes to my mind that this is something similar to LinkedIn. It is it is something that is basically looking at for networking or professional networking. And what I need to do is firm up a subject first. So what I would do is I'm doing an introduction about myself and why I want to create professional connections. So I would probably put the subject here is like, say, introduction. It has to be appropriate. That is where your grading will also happen. Introduction and professional connections. So what I would want to do is why I want to be a part of this network is because I'm writing an email to connect, which is the career loop, and saying that I want to give you my introduction, and that is what are the reasons of me to look at the getting onto this network or getting onto this site. Now there are a couple of ways that you can start. One could be I could say hello, instead of hi or hello. That could be one way of doing it. The other way would be because I don't have a name, I can't write dear somebody. So you're not writing an official letter where you can say dear madam or sir. So again, these salutations might not be totally appropriate. So this might not be totally appropriate. Hi sounds too familiar. You could also maybe look at a hello, but I would probably also do away with that. What I would do is start with, say, good morning. I'm assuming that I'm writing an email in the morning, or it could be something like good afternoon. It could be something like greetings. You know, if you're writing an email to somebody that you're not familiar with, you normally would start with a salutation or a neutral word, which would be addressable to anybody who's getting that email. It could be a he or a she, it could be a him or a they, it could be somebody who comes across in their organization, which will be responsible for receiving these kind of emails. And because I don't know whether it's a person, whether it's a male or a female, or is it somebody who's at the operations, what department they are. So, what I want to be doing is carefully choosing a title or carefully looking at mentioning something which actually opens the email as an icebreaker, serves as an icebreaker. That means it is able to break the ice with the company and put a good impression. So, I would normally start with, say, good morning, you know, and I would say, or if you want to be, you can also write hello because you're looking at professional networking, and obviously in that case you would normally start off with a greeting. So I would say hello, and I would say my name is Raman, and I am writing to introduce myself and building begin building professional, because the site is about professional connections through connect, oh sorry, career loop. So you can see that I'm specifically capitalizing career and loop because that is the company, and I'm following some of the guidance which is already given in the instructions to me. Now, I am looking at so I would probably start off by describing about myself. So I currently work in education where my role involves planning, coordination, and supporting learners to develop English language speaking, listening, writing, and reading skills. Essentially, as an English teacher now for over 15 years, now for over 15 years, I enjoy working in a structured environment environment where people and employers value clear communication and collaboration. So in this paragraph, the topic is quite personal. I have written something about myself, which basically tells them about me and why I'm looking at making personal connections or professional connections in this case, sorry. And I'm writing to Career Loop, the company which is going to help me obviously create these professional connections. So there's a bit of an introduction I've written, and what I would then do is it's go to the second point. It says describe your workday. So I'm going to start off with a typical work day for me involves teaching students about different topic. So teaching students the short sentences so that I don't make mistakes. The teaching revolves around covering different topics of the English language course. This is generally done using activities, presentations, and discussions. And I would also include things, for example, what do I do? Some because I'm describing what a typical day looks like. I spend a large part of my day communicating with colleagues. You would see that, when we are using this editor on the exam, there is no red lines which come or doesn't detect, any spelling mistakes, because this is a written exam, and these are things which are disabled in the software. So you have to be particular. You're cross-checking and obviously ensuring that your spelling is correct, your punctuation, your grammar, and your sentence construction is, it reading efficiently. It is reading well. It is making sense. So deadlines are met. I also take time to reflect on how processes can be improved, as I believe continuous learning is essential in any profession. So basically, what I've done is I've written something about my typical day, and towards the end, what I want to do is cover this part, explain how this would be beneficial for us, or in my case, why am I looking at professional connections? So connecting with professionals from different. So here I would say professionals and English teachers. I'm just going to contextualize it from different countries and different. I would write countries because obviously different countries. Sometimes teachers go on an exchange program would be extremely valuable to me. So international work connections offer newer perspectives. Anything that I'm not sure of in terms of my spellings or words, I would want to avoid in writing. So if there are words that you feel you are not very familiar with, you can make spelling mistakes. The idea is not to use those words, replace them with something different that you are able to, write confidently without having to make any mistakes. Simple sentences they tend to work best. So these connections with other teachers would help collaborate in knowledge sharing and professional growth. And I'm having a key eye on the words. I've gone to 200, which is fine. I don't need to go anymore. And then what I would do is basically look at a bit of formatting so it flows well. And I'm looking at the time as well. I've got 33 minutes. What I would do is basically bring this to an end and look forward to connecting with professionals through career, again, capitalization, career loop, and expanding expanding my network. Now, because this is an email, so I would obviously write either kind regards, or you can use best wishes, or in some cases just say regards and obviously write your name. So use one. And because you're writing to a company, in this case, it is like an official email. Make sure you put a comma, you obviously put down your name, and that would help you complete this particular activity. Now, in this particular exam that we have looked at and the activity that we've carried out today, we have got what is called the article. We need to know how an article looks like, and then obviously a letter, email instead of a letter, and we need to know how we need to be able to write this particular, email, and that would be, covering both the activities to be able to ensure that I get good marks in this and I pass. Now, in order for you to do a bit of practice, what I would suggest is if you go on to Moodle, because we don't know what kind of topics will come or what kind of test scenario would be given to write an article, to write an email, to write a letter, or to write a report. So what we are going to do is do a bit of practice. So when you go into Moodle, go to NCFE courses, go to English writing, which you should have access to. And within that, specifically when we do writing, we look at punctuation, grammar, spelling, sentences. How do we organize writing it in paragraphs, smaller sentences, sentences which flow, make sense, they convey the meaning. In some cases, when you're writing a report or an article, you have to use persuasion. And how do you do that is going to be given, and how to use complex sentences in paragraph. Now, the journal section of this would give you some activities to do. When you are writing emails, you can refer to, for example, some of the examples I've given. What is a format of a report? What is a format of an article? How do you write emails? There are some books and articles which are given. So if I click on writing emails, there is a bit of a handout which I've created and given to you, which I would suggest that you need to go through and read. So, how do you understand what is the context of writing emails? How do you use formal and informal phrases? This is what I would expect you to go through, and then look at some of the examples which are given. Obviously, these are short examples. We are looking at writing 150 to 175 words, but it gives you a very clear idea in terms of how do you write formal emails, how do you write informal emails, what is formal use of English language, what is informal use of English language. So, my suggestion would be to go through and read this particular article so that you have a good understanding when an email is being asked to be written, you're able to essentially write it confidently, and you know what are the differences depending on the topic or the topic test which is being given. So if it says write an email, this was to a company, it says write an email to your friend inviting her to a Christmas dinner, that how would you write it? It is going to be slightly informal. That is what you're going to do. And the second bit that I would suggest is when you write a letter of complaint, there is an activity, for example, email oblique, a letter would come. So go through this activity, see how the letter has been written, and then practice writing a particular letter by downloading or writing it on a piece of paper on a Word document that you're in on the PC. So there are a couple of activities that I've given. Letter writing a complaint. There is a letter for making a booking. So there is an example given, and also at the same time, there is example that you would need to practice on by assuming a topic that this is what I'm writing a letter for. Now, these letters are samples and they are quite brief. So my session will you look at writing about 150 words as a bare minimum. Then there's a letter asking for information again, just as an example, and then writing emails go across into details like a report sample. These are Word documents which will open up and download on your PC oblique Mac. This is an example of how an article would look like and what you need to be careful about when you do write an article. This is what you would need to look at doing a bit of practice. So go through this particular part in the journal section today after what we have done and covered in the session, which will help you revise the details of what a writing test would actually involve. And should you get stuck in places where you want to go through, then there are videos on each of the topics that you need to read through and listen in. These are short videos. When you click on them, there are your punctuation skills. They are basically short videos of 4 or 5 minutes, which will take you through the full topic. And obviously, I make you understand why and where it is important in the context of when you're doing a writing exam. So each of these sections that you go through would have a introductory video. And these videos are what you need to watch to be able to perfect some of the ideas and the topic list which is required to be covered essentially in the writing exam. Is that okay? Any questions on this? Any questions, any queries, feel free to ask. So, what I would expect you to do, no questions, that's fine. And I hope you found this session interesting and useful. So, what I would suggest is, after this session, my request would be to primarily log into Moodle and start going through some of this article list so that you're able to, let's say, revise what we've discussed today. And then at the end of it, what I would suggest is I'm going to try and put down this test link here, which is available, so that what you would be able to do at some stage is look at the practice test. Um, so practice test link. So I'll put this here on the Moodle so you're able to also do a practice test later once you have actually done, the revision of it. And then we'll meet up next week to discuss the writing section again, but we are hopefully going to cover a letter and we are going to look at covering a report to perfectly crystallize and understand how you're going to be able to meet and obviously confidently complete the writing part of the test. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for attending this session today, and I will catch you with you same time next week, to do another detailing on the writing section.